Hi guys, this is Chris from Chris's Retro Gaming. I recently approached Retro Bear about a collaboration and he very kindly agreed. So, enjoy!
So, firstly, I am the Retro Bear, and you are just looking at me sitting in what is, I suppose, really fably known as the Gaming Pantry, where I do all my gaming and videos from. And I was approached a few weeks back by Chris. Chris's Retro Gaming, to come and do a collaboration video with him, which I was very happy to do so, because it touched on a subject very, very close to my heart, which is Amiga games. Now, I had an Amiga growing up. It was the first real computer I had, so this really was right in my area, so I had absolutely no hesitation in agreeing to do this, and I'm very pleased to have done so. But it also touches on another area which I have a great interest in, which is films. Always been interested in films, so films and video games coming together doesn't always work, but it's always fun to find out why and how and the why nots and the why who's and etc. and the goods and the bads about it, because one thing that always seems to turn up in bad games, they're based on film licenses. They're never quite done properly. Now, if we're going to go back as we are with these three games today, there's a lot of stuff there which is very, very basic compared to perhaps how things were 10 years after. But what we got developed was a formula which was very much stuck to, and although it was great when it started, we'll see a good example today, we'll see a average example today, and a perhaps not so good example today. So we've just really picked three games here which are right across the spectrum. In fact, they all three were on the spectrum, if you want to talk about it, but yes, they were. Now, let's talk about the first game then, because we're going to go back to 1989. And one of the biggest films ever to come out in a summer release, and the hype behind this film was unbelievable. In fact, I was desperately trying to think before I recorded this, a film which had generated so much hype beforehand. And I can't think of anything, because usually, summer films, winter films, coming out now, holiday season films are all hyped beyond belief. And we've been used to that for the past 30 years. But if you go back a little bit further, in fact, all three of these films probably fall into that category. The build-up behind these was quite extraordinary at the time. So for 1989's Batman, which was directed by Tim Burton, starring Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson, this was a huge film. First of all, it's Batman. Now, Batman was a huge franchise, from comic books to the 1960s TV series, and there'd never been a big screen version of it. And back then, film companies weren't sort of dipping their toes into comic book adaptations. Very, very gingerly. I mean, there had been a Superman series of films, which pretty much by the fourth one, which came in, I think probably would have been 88 or 89 anyway, that was pretty much killed the franchise stone dead. There'd been sporadic attempts to try and integrate, a Spider-Man TV series, Wonder Woman, but it hadn't really worked. So this was really an absolutely massive thing to take a huge iconic figure like Batman and put it into a film. And you couldn't go anywhere during the summer of '89 without seeing a bat insignia or some reference to Batman. And yet when it came out, everyone was a bit disappointed, I remember at the time, because they all thought, this will be like the TV series, the really camp 1960s colourful one with Adam West. No, it was completely different. It was so much darker. And I think over time, it's been more appreciated as the film it was. I mean, this particular incarnation of Batman had four films. There was Batman Returns, which was 2 years after this, Batman and Batman Forever, and then Batman and Robin, and over the course of time they increasingly got progressively worse. So you end up actually appreciating the first one, and probably the second one, which is undoubtedly the best of the four films from the original franchise anyway. Now, at this time, to tie everything in, you were bringing in as much licensing as you could possibly do. So the license to put a video game about Batman out, and Batman the movie in particular, ended up in hands of Ocean Software, who had a fair reputation for converting arcade games, mostly from Taisho. But big name on the domestic home computer scene. And they would have huge success with RoboCop. Probably, I think RoboCop was just released around that same time. The film, in a couple of years earlier, the game came along a little bit later, and that really sort of set the high bar. And then Batman very much followed that, and you'll see within the game, they all sort of follow the very, very similar linear running of it. It's all very, very different. But let's stop talking about it now. Let's have a look at the footage Chris put together, and I'll talk you through it a bit more as we go through. Right, so here we go with Batman the movie from 1989. Yes, this is the very first game I ever loaded onto an Amiga. We can see the characterisation of Michael Keaton as Batman on the left and the Joker, played by Jack Nicholson, in the film on the right hand side. The game is split into 5 levels, of which we can see the first level is the Axis Chemical Factory. Now this simulates the idea of really what all these Ocean and Film Time license games end up being. Very sort of formulaic, very much laying out the same format each game with different variations. So you've got enemies throwing bombs at you, people shooting at you, you've got poison gas, you've got acid drops to avoid. Quite a bit of planning really, and it's not a linear level. You have really able to work your way around it really, really carefully. All the way to the very end, where you get to the opportunity here to knock the Joker into the vat of chemicals, which we can see replicated on the right hand side with the shot from the film, compared to the left hand side with the shot from the game. Very, very similar. Now level 2, which we'll call next. And here we go, and this is a driving level, and to me one of the best game sequences that you could find, one of them in terms of mini levels. It was really fast and exciting to play, and it's against the clock, which is also very, very important. So you've got the distance in the top right hand corner, your speed in the top left hand corner, and you have to batarang around the corners using the rope. Well, the fire button, you can see here, the film does exactly the same thing. That's how Batman does it, because there are no brakes on the Batmobile. You don't brakes the Batmobile, do you? And simply, once you reach the target, get to the end of it, you move on to level 3. Now, this is probably the trickiest one of the lot. This is the Bat Cave, where you have to calculate the formula to work out the antidote to the Smilex poison. And yes, you just pick elements, and it tells you how many you've got right, and then yeah, if you get it right, you move to the next level. If you don't, you don't. And you can see here Chris brilliantly illustrates his first go there, none, his second go, 3. It's that difficult. It really is. It's just completely random. We move to the 4th level, which is the Batwing level, where you have to cut the ropes between the balloons to set them free, and you have a number of balloons on the right hand side, which is 100 to cut, and your speed on the left hand side. Now, this is very much a tactical race against the clock. You don't want to go too fast, because if you go too fast you cause damage to your Batwing. If you hit the balloons, you can cause damage to your Batwing. It really is quite difficult to do. So getting that balance between speed and variation against the clock is actually crucial. If not, your Batwing here will catch fire, and eventually, if you go too much damage, you'll catch fire and basically die. There's no more way around it. There we go, so we complete that, and then finally Chris moves on to the final level, which is the Gotham City Cathedral. This is pretty much the same as the first level. More enemies and slightly bigger area to cover. Also a couple of extra elements. For example, you've lost a lot of the swinging element here. You have to go up and down a few flights of stairs. You have to avoid the giant rats on the floor, because they will take your energy like everything else, so there are ways of dealing with them. And then of course there are the odd dissolving platforms, as you can see here. Now, as we get towards the very end of it, this will give you an idea, because what we'll see now is Batman getting to the top, where he tries to stop the Joker escaping in a helicopter, and you'll see on the right hand side how the film compares to the game. Now, those are my generalisations over the gameplay. Now, Chris has very kindly put on an email what he thought about the film, and I thought, well, I'll just read Chris's comments out, and then if I can add anything to that or take anything away from that, see whether I agree with him or not. Probably the best way to do it. So, he's got very little to say about this game, which is a good sign, because if he's got very little to say about it, he's probably as happy as I was with it. Overall, it's a pretty decent attempt by the developers, and it follows the movie pretty closely. Now, I think with the shots he put in there compared with bits of the film, yes, I would wholeheartedly agree. It sort of takes real key elements out of that, and it creates the best game it possibly can do. He does mention that the recreations of the films were very, very good. However, surprised there wasn't a museum level or a blowing up of the Axis chemical factory with the Batmobile level. But again, limitations at the time of these things may not have allowed something like that. But that's all he's put there. So in terms of comments, he's got very little to say about it, other than the fact he thinks it's a really good game. And I would wholeheartedly agree. It's a game I played many, many times, a game I finished many, many times, and went back to over and over and over again. And I'm very pleased to say that within the confines of this great plastic collection I've got, I had this game numerous times lurking around. In fact, I even played Batman the movie as recently as last year when I got an A500 Mini, and I got a USB stick with all those games loaded on it, and that was one of them. And it was nice to sort of rekindle my memories of it. I wasn't as good as I used to be, but then again, that was sort of 35, 36 years ago, when I was a 14-year-old lad playing it for the first time. Not a 50-year-old, near 50-year-old, should I say, nearly 50-year-old man trying to recapture his youth. But on the whole, I think me and Chris can wholeheartedly agree that Batman, the movie, was a pretty good game based around a pretty good film, which has definitely stood the test of time. Now, we're going to fast forward 12 months from that one to our next game, which is Back to the Future 2. Now, as previously mentioned, Batman was packed in with an Amiga when you bought one back for Christmas 1989. That's where we got ours from. And Back to the Future 2, I believe, had the same treatment given to it the following winter, because everybody at school in 1990, as far as I can remember, everybody, even people who never had computers before in their lives, even people who weren't interested in computers, were all getting Amigas for Christmas. And I think there was Days of Thunder, which was a terrible film and game, Back to the Future 2, and something else, name eludes me now. I'm not a nostalgic channel. If anybody hasn't seen this before, I'm not a nostalgia nerd. And it was tied in with that. Now, I went to see Back to the Future 2 at the cinema. I went to see Batman the movie at the cinema. I went to see Back to the Future 2 at the cinema. And I remember being incredibly disappointed because we all held Back to the Future very highly in high regard. And with the second film, because there was so much jumping around between 1985, 2015, 1955, it was quite confusing at the time. And I think, again, when it was reviewed, it got reviewed quite poorly compared to the first film because of the confusion and trying to keep up the storyline and jumping around all over the place. And it pretty much got regarded as the weaker of the three films. Now, when I review these films again, years later, I actually find I love the first one. In fact, I've just literally finished watching the first one this afternoon before I recorded this. I don't mind the third one. I'm not quite as keen on the third one as other people are, but I quite like the second one. But I've grown more appreciative of the second one over time, and I think it's really quite fun the way you can see in the first one the seeds being laid all the way through the story, and then when you get to the second film, you can see these are starting to pull themselves together a little bit and why certain things are happening. So yeah, I think it's a more fun film now than it was back when I first saw it. But here we are 12 months later, we can see that a completely different software company are adopting the same processes that Ocean Software were in terms of laying out a game in stages based on sequences of the film, which I shall stop talking and you can have a look at yourself right now.
Marty! You've got to come back with me. Where? Back to the future.
Yes, the opening or the end of Back to the Future into Back to the Future 2, shown there by a clip from the film, which was on the right hand side, and the left hand side was how the game replicated it, which was basically very basic. Apologies for the lower quality volume on this, by the way. I've had real trouble trying to balance this out between being able to hear me talk about the game and also find the game footage working at the same time. So yeah, sorry about the balance may be a little bit off, but we're just trying to work through things best we can. Hope you get the idea from it anyway. So this is Back to the Future 2, which starts us off in Hill Valley in 2015, which recreates the hoverboard chase. So as you can see, it's pretty faithful to the actual part of the game itself. You've got members of the gang chasing you around. You can see old Biff walking around with his cane, although he doesn't seem to do a lot. There's the modified Pepsi bottles. There's also some letters to pick up as well, and you can grab hold of the back of cars, which we should just be able to illustrate here. There we go. To move on, Doc Brown walks around for absolutely no reason whatsoever, doesn't do anything, and yeah, you might think this should actually remind you of the Neighbours, the game of the TV series, which was very, very similar. And it's not a particularly great level. This is the sort of game that drove me mad when I was playing it. I just couldn't get on with it at all. The angle, the ability to move around, and I don't know. It's just a horrible, horrible. Just a horrible experience playing this game. It really was, so much so that I couldn't really fathom going any further with it. Now, obviously, Chris has persevered, as always Chris does, as you watch his gameplay videos usually. Now, what it's going to replicate here is the end of the level. Now, if you remember the film, Marty gets stuck on the water, and the gang then end up crashing into the city hall to change the course of history, and we're about to see how that's going to look. You'll see the game footage on the left and the film footage on the right hand side. It's all a bit basic, really. Yeah, I appreciate that technology is not exactly what it was back then, but there we go. This part here is level 2, where you have to move Jennifer around the house so she doesn't encounter anybody from the future. The problem is, which Chris points out, and I'll mention it at the end, is that he doesn't actually know which one is Jennifer. So I'm guessing top right hand corner, that's Jennifer. Or is it? I don't know. And the idea is you have to get out right down the bottom middle without anybody seeing you. And once you do that, then you complete the level. But this game would really sort of infuriate me more than the first level. It's all done against the clock, which probably doesn't help things either. You can see the front door is open there, and then somebody walks out, and then you get a bonus life. I don't know, was that Jennifer? Not quite sure. And everything's sort of done with this like staged, very nicely rendered screen, but obviously all they do is stand there and move their mouths. We're now on to the third level, which is, I don't know, probably the most unimaginative of the 5 levels we're going to see here. This is a side-scrolling beat-em-up where all you seem to be able to do is kick people in the mid-region, I suppose the best way to describe it. You can see some of the enemies there from the actual film itself. The cowboy with the cosh, there he is, and that guy there as well, the silver. You do run into other characters like Mr. Strickland, who's got a gun, which seems rather unfair because all you've got is basically ability to kick people. There is Mr. Strickland, Slacker, and yeah, you can only defeat him by kicking him. Small cowboys with coshes. Yeah, it's just unimaginative. It's really, really quite poor, to be honest with you. And everybody seems to take about 75 hits. Biff's gaming paradise, and then you then kick Biff a few times and he dies before you get picked up in the DeLorean, and then you move on to the next level. Now it's up to you now, Marty. I should do the accent, look at the voice. We're now going back to 1955. Yes, because as the film jumps around all over the place, so does the game. And then you have to recreate the Enchantment Under the Sea picture. Top left-hand corner is what you need to recreate. And it's a sliding tile puzzle game. Is it unimaginative. Well, it doesn't really fit in with the rest of it. And these sort of things are never fun, are they? I remember these from a kid. They're just not fun to do. And also, again, as with everything else in this game, you're on a time limit, and it's a very strict time limit. You've got to move an awful lot of tiles into the right position to be able to recreate the picture. If you don't get it right, then unfortunately, there's not much else you can do about it. That's it. It's going to be game over. And you get 5 minutes, and it's still not enough time. Does this have anything to do with the game? Not really. Yes, we know Marty has a photograph which he has to keep referring to, but this has nothing to do with it. And again, you can see here very, very closely, all Chris had to do was move that top line across one, and underneath he would have done it. But there, he couldn't do it. Wow. And then we go on to the final level, 1955 once again. And it says we've got to go back to 1955. Well, we're already there. Because it's Enchantment Under the Sea dance. We are already there, so we're not going back to 1955. We are in 1955, and it's a recreation of the first level, which is again not particularly great. A lot of lack of imagination being shown here. Simple kicking and punching moves, and the idea here is you have to get the almanac off Biff to stop him going. Placing the future sports results and changing history. But yeah, it's exactly the same as the first level, and you thought they might have put a bit more imagination into it. You could say the same with Batman, I suppose, but yeah, it just, bear in mind that the last level's entirely in a tunnel in the film, which is this bit here. You'd have thought that they're trying to do something a little bit different. But no, it's kick and punch all the way. And then now, what you'll see is Doc rescuing Marty at the end of the film, which is on the right hand side, and then you'll see how it's replicated in the game. Not bad. For me, Back to the Future 2 lacks the polish that Batman had. I don't know whether it's trying too hard or what. I want to comment there about the introduction not looking great. I've sort of seen it again now, the big screen version compared to the small screen version again. I think it's not too bad, I suppose, but I think probably for 1990 technology I was expecting maybe a little bit more. I don't know, but it's a game, like I said, I just simply couldn't get on with. That first level just sinked me. So we are dependent entirely on Chris's gameplay and his experiences with this to talk us through it. So I've got Chris's notes here once again, and he's got quite an extensive listing and comments here. So his initial thoughts is, this is not a good game. Levels 1 and 2 and 5 are the only moderately playable levels. Now bear in mind that 1 and 5 are pretty much the same level, as in we're Batman. 1 and 5 are pretty much the same level. And he quite enjoyed the walking in between the room level, which I think if I got that far, I would have been putting more hair out than I've actually lost. So in terms of level 1, and I should apologise for my Biff, Griff, Guff, Goff, confusions in that video, because I can't work out who, so half the time. See, I was confused about Back to the Future 2 as a kid. Yeah, and then we move forward to the third film, and he's not called Biff, he's called Buford. That's going to confuse me even more when we get this, because it's really going to confuse me, isn't it? Yeah. So, level 1 does a good job recreating the 2015 Hill Valley from the movie, including the taxis, police cars, even down to the Pepsi bottles. It's good that you can knock down the other 3 members of Griff's gang, and he's got a pointer here for you that you do play the game. Don't actually, when you see Biff, the one going around on the hoverboard with the club, don't try and hit him, because you can't do anything until the end of the level. It won't make any difference. Doc Brown, as we saw there, walks around the level but doesn't actually do anything. And then old Biff is there, and he waves a cane at you, though he does take energy off you if he hits you. You can also go onto the back of cars, as we pointed out during the video. Very, very important. Right at the end of the level, the hoverboard, unlike the film, will carry on going unless you fail to move or you go too slowly, in which case it will stop. But obviously in the film, once you got onto the water, that's it. You're absolutely stuffed. We should find that out one day. Well, it's 2025, isn't it now? Yeah, anyway. Now, unlike what I saw there, Chris seems to think that the end bit where the gang fly into the City Hall compared to the recreation of the film is actually pretty good. I actually think it was completely the opposite. I thought it was quite a poor effort, to be fair, because the sprites just go straight to the building and disappear. I know you can't do expansive graphics, but maybe a bit more of an oomph to it. I don't know. Level 2, which is one of the other level you enjoyed, a simple logic puzzle to get Jennifer out of the house while never being in the same room as anyone else. So she's got to make sure she doesn't come across anybody from the future. It's reasonably playable, says Chris, but he doesn't. The only problem is the game doesn't actually tell you which character is Jennifer, and that's a real back foot start, isn't it? You know, you're actually giving nowhere to start with. Which one am I meant to be? Well, yeah, that's a fault. We can't pick faults too much with a game which is 35 years old, can we? I don't know, maybe we can. Level 3, now this is the side-scrolling beat 'em up, which was actually atrocious, which Chris uses the words here, awful attempt. Some of the enemies take up to 5 hits to kill, and they almost constantly keep coming, so you can end up with a long line of them. The problem is, if you look at the video again, they don't seem to fight back an awful lot. So you can really see just how basic this is. Most of the blows don't connect. You do encounter young Mr. Strickland firing at you with his shotgun, and Biff firing at you with a gun, but you can only beat them by punching and kicking them. So he's not a big fan of the level. I've got to be honest with you, even though I've never played that level, it looked pretty sort of mundane and without any real imagination. The 4th level, which was a sliding tile puzzle, Chris says, terrible choice for a level. They're notoriously frustrating, and this has no bearing on the movie other than the picture formed by completing the puzzle. Well, he's absolutely right. There's no correlation between the two, is there? If you've seen the film, Marty McFly absolutely no point whatsoever has to complete a tile puzzle, so it's not authentic. The text introduction between Marty and Doc is extremely vague and ambiguous. Doc says, it's up to you now, Marty. Sort out this mess and your future depends on it. Well, if he's talking about getting the sports helmet back from Biff, then Doc specifically states in the film that both of their futures depend on it, and not just Marty's. And of course, if you remember, in the film, I think I said May said a voiceover, there's that paper clipping that Doc's got with him, which changed from being honoured to committed to a mental asylum. So yes, he's absolutely right. It's not just Marty's future. I mean, Marty might get erased from existence, but Doc's future is also going to be affected by it. You can see why film critics at the time had a real problem, with the film. And then level 5, which is the retread of level 1, the text at the start of the level makes no sense. We have got to get back to 1955 and stop Biff giving his younger self the sports almanac. Chris points out, well, first of all, the level is set in 1955, since the previous level was the Enchantment Under the Sea dance. And secondly, Doc makes it very clear to Marty in the film that he absolutely must not interfere with old Biff giving young Biff the sports book. He must let old Biff believe he succeeded, so he'll return to 2015 with the DeLorean, and then Marty must grab the book after old Biff is gone. So you can see again, this is the source material perhaps not correlating with the game. And it may be a bit of a shortcut taken by the game producers to try and choose something together. Don't forget, if you get a film licence like this back in the day, you've got a time scale to get these things done by. It's very, very tight. They were probably working to an incredibly tight schedule to get this game out in time for when the film came out, or shortly afterwards. Very similar to the first level, lots of things from 1955, but for some reason, why is 2015 Biff there? The final part of the tunnel follows the movie reasonably well when entering the tunnel and then turning around once Marty had acquired the almanac. You saw that bit right at the very end. And then Marty getting rescued by Doc pulling him up into the air. And then Biff crashing into the manure truck, recreated fairly well. So, yeah, I think on the whole, he's got an up and down opinion of that. I mean, I've never played enough of it, so I can't really offer much more than that. But I remember at the time I just wasn't very impressed with it. There was nothing about that first level, which I had as a demonstration. I got it off a demo disc off the front of a magazine. There was nothing about that game that made me want to finish that level and then, or get to the end of that playable section and think, yes, I really want to go out and get this game now. And that was the whole point back in those days, where you had demos that were released for people to try a small portion of the game to see how they got on with, that whether you wanted to go out and actually buy it or not. And I must be honest with you, it never felt like that to me. So, on the whole, I don't think Chris and me are particularly going to be seeking out Back to the Future 2. Do I have Back to the Future 2 at some point in my collection? I believe I've got it on a Spectrum compilation, which was about 4 film licenses, which I think we talked about the accursed Days of Thunder a short while ago. That's on there, I believe, as well. I don't think I have it as a standalone. I'm not sure I want to track it down as a standalone. I think just having it tucked away in a Spectrum compilation somewhere will quite do me. Right then, so we shall now move on to our third and final game, which Chris has put together for us on some gameplay. And this is another huge sort of film from the early 1990s, and again a sequel to a fantastic original, like Back to the Future too. It was a sequel to Back to the Future, obviously. And we're talking about Ghostbusters 2. Now, Ghostbusters, which came out in 1984, was we talked about Batman having the hype for it. I think the hype around Ghostbusters was sort of built up from there, and it just sort of exploded into that year. I remember it being, the song being everywhere more than anything else. Obviously, the merchandising wasn't quite there, I don't think. I think that may have come along a bit later, maybe more around the second film. And for years, people said, you've got to try and make a sequel, and obviously it's very difficult for people wanting to get involved in doing stuff that, and we've seen it actually since Ghostbusters 2 came out. There's always been talk of a third Ghostbusters, always was talk of a third Ghostbusters film, and there's always, so-and-so doesn't want to do it, and so-and-so doesn't want to do it, and so-and-so doesn't want to do it. And so much so there was actually a Ghostbusters game, an original game released in the late 2000s, which came on to PlayStation 3, Xbox 360 and the Wii, which got a very, very favourable reviews at the time, and people said, that really feels like the third Ghostbusters film, because they actually got the vocal talents of some of the actors involved, and people said there's a proper script behind it. It actually felt like it was the third film. Well, obviously we got sequels to Ghostbusters and Ghostbusters 2 in the last 5 years, which, depending on what your opinion is, did they need to make them at all? Obviously, Harold Ramis has passed, and therefore the character of Egon was not within those possibilities to film it, although they did sort of use the ghost of him, I suppose, in the first one. And they managed to get the original cast members to come back and reunite to the original Ghostbusters, but I don't know. I just, it felt like a nostalgia trip, and the amount of hatred that people gave the supposed reboot of Ghostbusters with an all-female cast was totally unwarranted. I quite like that film, I must be honest with you. I think that's, as a standalone film, was quite good, and even within the Ghostbusters universe, I still think it was a good film. I really did enjoy that when I first saw it. It's actually a film that my other half, Mrs. Bear, who collects 3D Blu-rays, has amongst her collection. You don't see it very often. It's not overly rare, but you don't see it all that often. But for me, yeah, Ghostbusters, the all-female cast, I thought was a much better film than people give it credit for. Now, when Ghostbusters 2 came out, again, like Batman and like Back to the Future, it wasn't particularly overly well reviewed. And if you watch the film back, it is really, really uneven. The chemistry is there between the characters. The story is very linear. It sort of develops into this sort of dip with the Statue of Liberty part, which really just sort of brings everything down as far as I do before you get to the final finish. It almost like a retread of the first film in the way it works, that sort of pattern. But when we have the Stay Puffed Marshmallow Man, that seems to work, because that's just crazy. With the Statue of Liberty, it seems like a tie-in for the NES Advantage stick, because that's what they use to control the Statue of Liberty with. Yeah, I'm not entirely sure. Anyway, let's have a look at the game, because that's what we're here for. We're not here to listen to my opinions about films. Let's see what the game looks like, and then we'll draw some comparisons at the end with Chris's comments. So moving to Ghostbusters 2, which was the following year, I think it was. We can't actually give you any opening credits on this one because Chris has tried, but unfortunately YouTube wouldn't let him do it. So we have to go straight into the first level, which is lowering Ray into the New York sewers to get a sample of the slime to find out why New Yorkers are causing problems of their own doing, really. And it's a really tricky level. You're going to maintain your wits about you by shooting all the enemies, picking things up, swinging from left to right, and yeah, you really literally have to provide concentration. It's so frustrating, this level, and I absolutely hated it. From the first moment I played it, I just could not get on with this game at all. It really was so annoying, and I even played it on the Commodore 64 a couple of years ago, and it was exactly the same. Again, on the right hand side of the comparison to the film, that's Ray being lowered into the sewer. On the left hand side, you just sort of float at the bottom. No real imagination there, and then you move on to the second level. Now this is the shoot 'em up part with the Statue of Liberty, which has been reanimated. Can you reanimate a statue? I don't know, possibly you can. Using an NES Advantage joystick, which I think was the only reason it was done, was to actually sell more NES Advantage joysticks, because this is about as generic and unimaginative as you can get. Simply moving from left to right and shooting a lot of ghosts that you may recognise from the film. Yeah, it's not good. Bear in mind that the Amiga was pretty good at doing side scrollers. This is not particularly great at all. It's a really quite poor attempt at a level. No real imagination or intuitive being shown here. It's just simple standard shoot 'em up left to right, and yeah, not great either. Does it recreate the bit from the film? No, not really, because you're not doing any of this. You're not shooting ghosts in the second part of the film. So there we go. Now, final level is an isometric sort of rescue them up. So on the right hand side you can see the bit where Janos is being slimed, and then of course you have to in the film kill Vigo by using the proton streams, and you can see on the left hand side replicated pretty well in the film, in the game of the film. It's actually quite good. You get this nice little sequence at the end with Dana and Peter playing Happy Families. Yes, yet another game I can't get on with. I don't know where these come from. Every game I don't know why I bother doing it. Every game I just can't get on with these days. I couldn't get on with this at the time. Particularly that first level. That first level used to frustrating the heck out of me. And that's why I never went and got involved with the actual game itself afterwards, because there wasn't enough in that first level for me to think it. Plus the fact that it's such a short game in terms of the number of levels. And we're looking at a game here created by, put together by a different software company, so it's Activision. So we've got 3 different software companies, all following the same patterns of developing games using sequences from the film as levels. And in some cases it works, and in some cases it doesn't work. What does Chris think? Because Chris has provided me with some short notes this time. He's certainly, put it this way, slightly longer than Batman, but nowhere near as long as Back to the Future. So, see what he thinks. Overall, not a great game, but it follows the film reasonably well. Could have had a courtroom level, a train line level, a firefighting at the lab level, etc. Yes, those were all key moments in the film. They go underground on the old disused railway. Yes, there is that bit where the actual lab catches fire. You know, we've seen games with firefighting levels and things like that. Not much comment about level 1 actually. He's sort of gone into more details about level 2 and 3. I mean, in terms of level 1, I mean, man, that's frustrating. Isn't it? I played that game on a Commodore 64 from one of my own series, Commodore Corner, a couple of years back. And I seriously could not get on with it. I played it on the Amiga and I seriously couldn't get on with it. Perhaps I was playing it all wrong, I don't know. It's not my sort of thing. Level 2, which is the Statue of Liberty level, which you saw there, the idea of using that sequence, the Statue of Liberty in the movie, was to rally the city's positive energy, but in the game it seems a very, very simple tool to shoot all the ghosts. So basically it becomes a left to right side scroller shooter, which isn't particularly great. And again, if you look at that again compared to the film, yeah, he's absolutely right, and there's a lack of imagination there. Level 3 though is slightly more well done, more of a strategy isometric level. So level 3 recreates the abseiling, the takedown of Janos, and the defeat of Vigo fairly well. Obviously you've seen those clips which is there, and I think probably that goes to show that this is maybe the most authentic one of the three we've got. Having to keep Oscar away from the platform in front of the painting to prevent Vigo's transfer to him was a pretty good feature, as was Ray getting possessed and having to be taken down after Vigo is defeated. Not sure why Dana wasn't included in this level, in case you don't know, and I think this is my recipe, but I'll tell you anyway because this is to do with the film. Janos has to be hit with slime, Vigo has to be hit with both proton streams simultaneously while Auld Lang Syne is playing, and possessed Ray has to be forced against the enemy painting canvas with the proton stream and then shot with the stream until he is defeated. So translate that into a computer game level if you may. But on the whole, I think he's pretty happy with that. And again, he got a lot further with it I ever did, so I can't really sort of comment on that. But again, short game. You know, we've gone from 5 levels down to about 3, and you maybe want a bit more to it than that. But I found that first level incredibly frustrating to play. Level 2 looks like it's going to be a bit of a boring sort of way to go in. And then finally, you know, level 3 probably the most imaginative of the lot, but quite frankly, if the first 2 levels are unimaginative and you can't get past them, what's the point of having a good third level? It's very strange. So yeah, so that is the wacky world of early or late 80s, early 90s film movie tie-ins with computer games. That's what we had back then. There were different versions of Batman. The 8-bit computer game versions differ from the 16-bit ones. There's a Batman Mega Drive game which isn't directly associated with the Ocean games, the same way that the Batman Sunsoft game on the NES isn't directly associated with it, but they are loosely tied to the film. If you move forward to Back to the Future 2, that came out on the Master System. Which again I've never played, but I can only imagine it's probably very similar to that. They did make a third Back to the Future 3 game, which was frustrating as anything. If you thought Back to the Future 2 was frustrating, wait till you actually go and play Back to the Future 3, because that apparently is even worse. And like I said, the Ghostbusters game, the original Ghostbusters game, which tied in with the original film, is widely regarded as one of the great classics of all time. Personally, I don't like it. There was a original Ghostbusters game for the Mega Drive which had nothing to do with the game, but had the characterizations of the 3 Ghostbusters from the original film, and is very well regarded, but can cost you an absolute fortune. The NES game on Ghostbusters is one of these notoriously bad games. And Ghostbusters 2 came out on all the 8 and 16-bit formats, but never made it a console. And let alone PS3, Xbox 360 and Wii, as I said, get their own versions of a completely fresh, written, brand new Ghostbusters episode. Really strange. But anyway, so yeah, that was what we had to deal with back then, and it's a real mixed bag, as I'm sure you'll agree. So those are my thoughts and comments. I've added Chris's thoughts and comments onto the game here, and I hope you found this side of it interesting. I'm going to toss it back to Chris to finish off. But yeah, if you do feel inclined to call into the gaming pantry, I am the Retro Bear, and they'll be very happy to see you here sometime soon. But until then, my thanks to Chris for allowing me to join this collaboration, and I'll toss it back to him for the final thoughts.